All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our March virtual tasting for the Forgotten Grapes Wine Club. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we start, I have to ask, are there any University of Arizona alumni in the house tonight?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's right, baby.
Oh,
I would kick
right.
you
Very
off
nice.
I would kick you-
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes, I would kick you off if you were, just as a yeah. But yeah, it's been a banner day. Arsenal gets booted out of Europe. Princeton beats Arizona. I'm doing a virtual tasting with some awesome winemakers who feature Austrian wines. What more could I possibly want at this point? It's a good day. We're gonna go with that. So we will meet our guests in just a second, but a couple of things. Thank you, Carrie. I appreciate it. Before we get started, of course, as always, we'll mute everybody before we start our chat. So if you have any questions, comments, throw them into the chat and we will ask them during the course of this. And most importantly, we got a fun little gift from last month's winery, Martha Stuman Wines. I think we ended up, Stuman was the right way that she pronounced it. So she was kind enough to give us this lovely Normcore hat of theirs. So we decided that this is going to be a giveaway for one of you. And Allison has a trivia question to ask. Whoever answers the trivia question first in the chat will win the Martha Stuman hat. So best of luck to you.
Wow, I feel first of all teamed up on having two Princetonites in one room. It's too much for me.
We're, it's like you're in an investment bank all of a sudden, or management consulting firm.
Do you want me to say it out loud or you want me to type it in the thing?
Nope, you can ask it out loud so that everybody has an even chance to ask it, and then whoever the first answer in the
we've had a fair number of wineries from Santa Ynez come and join us, or Santa Barbara County come in and join us. And there's one thing that we've hammered home quite a number of times, and I am sure you will hear David and Anna talk about this today. So let's see if you guys have been listening. But Santa Barbara wine country is unique because it is the only wine region in North America that has
blank.
Type it in, send it to me, and the first one I think Carrie already.
Well, we'll see.
He's gonna let someone else have it.
Yeah.
Come on.
Anyway, so we will monitor the chat while you're thinking about that.
If no one answers this, because David and Anna are probably going to give it away.
We do have a backup question that we will get to. Right. We'll give you a 10-minute time limit to get an answer on this one, and if not, we have a backup question that is also related to our very special guests, our March featured winery of the month, which is Solminer. And we are so pleased to have David and Anna deLaski with us today. Guys, how are you doing?
Thank you.
Yeah, we're doing great. Yeah, no,
it's so great to be here.
You pronounced it correctly. There was no
some people think it's sommelier.
I have many French and I'm going to go with Polish friends at the same time who we're combining together there. So maybe Spanish, maybe Italian. I don't know, but lots of friends. Oh, all right. Allison, retype the question. Good. So we always start our virtual tastings with the question, what is the most memorable bottle of wine that you guys have ever opened?
And
you can each answer separately. You can answer together. It's the beauty of having two of you at the same time.
Well, I've had a lot of good wine. I grew up. My dad had a cellar, it was full of Bordeaux's and things like that. But I think it's probably wine that we've drunken together.
Well, when we got married, I'm originally from Austria, and I moved to Los Angeles, and we took a road trip up the coast, and it was in Etna Valley where we found a Gruner Veltliner, and it was the first time that it was a Gruner Veltliner that was from outside of Austria, and I was just really surprised that a Gruner Veltliner could grow in California, because in my worldview, California was, beach and hot, and Austria is much more temperate climate. And I was really surprised to see how authentic it tasted.
So mind you, at this time, we had absolutely nothing to do with the wine industry. We were only wine drinkers at this point. And so we're drinking this wine, we're falling in love, we're saying, wow, this this is here. And so it started our whole, the light bulb went off, and we got married and started, you know, it all started from that kind of understanding of like, well, there's a Gruner Veltliner that happens here, you know. And so that was really,
Then we had the crazy idea to just say, like, what if we made one barrel of Gruner Veltliner here, and that the rest is history. Now this is our
Do you remember
11th.
whose Gruner Veltliner it was? And I'm sorry, I don't say it with the elegance that you say it.
Yes.
Zocker.
yeah, it was
Oh,
Zocker,
Zucker.
right? So that they were one of the first. I feel like, you know, so this was in 2011.
Mhm.
You know, there wasn't a lot of Gruner back then. I mean, there's still not a lot of Gruner, and
They were the second domestic Gruner that I had ever seen in my life. The first was up
Okay.
in Washington State, a winery called Darcy Kent.
Okay,
yes,
cool.
Darcy Kent for sure.
Yeah. But then Zocker, when I opened my wine shop, I remember trying to get both of those, and they were very, very difficult, very sold out very quickly. And I know, interestingly enough, I've been talking to some people about Gruner Veltliner. I'm going to start calling it now. That's fantastic. And give it the true Austrian pronunciation. But I know that the Paragon Vineyard that is home to that Gruner Veltliner recently changed hands, and it's going to be interesting to see what's going on with that. Or I guess maybe it's that the owners are planning on, was it Tangent Bailiana who owned Zucker?
Eliana,
Yeah,
yes.
I had heard that they're kind of winding down that Zucker label. This is, you know, some tea. So it'll be interesting to see if they try to replace that, or if they just open it up to a wider group of growers, people who are interested. Because I know there's at least 3 or 4 producers here in Paso alone that are working with the grape right now, which is phenomenal. So
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. And then I think the you know, the Austrian connection runs deep. As I said, you know, growing up on the East Coast and in the DC area, you know, you get into wine and you're reading Parker or whatever, and yeah, you're looking at Bordeaux, Cabs, things like that. So these white wines just all of a sudden became like just how monumental a white wine can be. And so when Anna took me back to Austria, and you know, everything, you know, you're in the Wachau, and these white wines are just monumental. And so I think another like a really monumental bottle goes to the Nikolaihof. We met the Sars family, Christina, and we tasted their, you know, 1996 Vinotech.
oh wow.
And that's a Riesling that's aged for 17 years.
Wow.
And of course, people don't even you know, so the age on this Riesling was just the patience that it takes to basically make that wine. And, you know, it was the first Austrian wine ever to be, not to be like worried about the points, but it's like, it was 100-point, you know, wine. And it was the first Austrian, you know, it really put Austria, wines like that really put Austria on the map for sure. So those are very special wines. And it really opened my eyes to just how amazing aged Riesling is. You know, you always think about aging Bordeaux or, you know, red wines for 20, 30 years, but, you know, the Riesling is amazing. And so I asked Christine, I was, well, what's the oldest Riesling that you have here in the winery? And she's like, well, 1950. Before that, the Russians took it all. So I guess, you know, that was basically but a good testament to a good aged Riesling is quite a monumental wine,
Yeah,
for sure.
they have this really old press, like 1,000-year-old press there.
gosh,
So
yeah.
if anyone ever goes there, I totally visit Nikolaihof. It's really special.
Yes. Yeah, and I definitely want to talk about the differences between German Riesling and Austrian Riesling, when we pour your Riesling here in a minute. But before we get there, so Anna, where in Austria did you grow up? Was wine, part of your family, part of your life, or was it something that you either discovered in Austria or over here in the US? And then I want to find out was it truly that bottle that was the impetus to getting the wine, or was it something that the pair of you had been thinking about for some time?
No, I grew up pretty close to the Wachau region, so it's called Treisental. Now that's another AVA now, but it's like 20-minute drive from the Wachau region, which is along the Danube and where the Romans have been forever. So I grew up going for walks within the vineyards. It's in Austria. There's no fences. You can walk through all the vineyards because there's always different owners and they all share the hills. And there's these Heurigens, so you just go, they're like wine taverns, and
Okay.
we would go for walks, and we would just have dinner there and have wine for €1 or something. It's quite different.
Good wine.
price. Yeah,
Good wine
Oh,
for
yeah.
€1.
but it's also it's for normal people, like how I grew up. It's not like a classy thing. It's everyone can afford it.
Yeah,
So-
you take your jug to the local vintner, and he taps you out of the tank or whatever, and you give him €3 or €5 for your gallon or your 4 liters or whatever it might be, and take it home, and that's what you enjoy for the week.
Yeah, no, totally. I remember there was a place where it was cheaper to get the wine than the sparkling water. So
Yeah.
I think they changed that because they needed to have a cheaper non-alcoholic drink on the list. So
I used to see that when we would go to France. It would be cheaper to get a glass of just the house wine than it would be to get a Coca-Cola or a Limon or something like that, which was always just crazy.
But I was just a wine drinker there, or like enjoyer of wine country. But it was really like an idea that we'd had to get when we met each other.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, to your point, I mean, it's really, Anna didn't grow up in a winemaking family. I didn't grow up in a winemaking family. We're first generation winemakers and wine growers, so we didn't have any real practical knowledge for making wine and growing grapes. And so when we met in 2009, and we met in LA, and I had been living in LA for since the early 90s, and it was really something when we met, and we came up here very early on in our relationship. It was kind of like our first date, our first weekend away. And fireworks were going off, we're looking in vineyards, we're romanticizing about it all, and somehow it all became reality. So I consider myself the luckiest guy on earth, pretty much.
Nice.
But we've been also, it's been some of the hardest.
I noticed she didn't say that she considers herself to be the luckiest woman on earth, but
No,
You agree, right?
Yes, no, totally. But it's a lot of work too. Like you never get bored. So
Yeah. Absolutely. So was Santa Barbara always the destination that you guys had in mind? I mean, I know you were living in LA when you met and got married, but had you always loved Santa Barbara? Did you look at other regions? Or was it really because you wanted to make Austrian wines, grow Austrian grapes, Santa Barbara was the ideal region for you?
to me, Santa Barbara is the wine region of Los Angeles, and that's where we started. And I love the region. I love its diversity. I don't want to say anything about your question yet, but I love how the microclimates are so different. In Europe, you would have to you have to travel 100 kilometers to get to different regions, and here you do that within a 5-minute drive. So I think it's a beautiful region for wine and for life. And
Absolutely.
yeah.
So,
And go ahead. Sorry, David, go ahead.
yeah, for sure. So to go on with our sort of origin story, I mean, it really, so coming up here and falling in love with this place and each other, and then the community, it's just a lot of serendipity sort of came about. We had that Zocker, but then we found Gruner growing in the Santa Rita Hills. It had been planted by Kathy Joseph of Fiddlehead, and we met the person who planted it, and he was just very encouraging. And we seemed to be under the impression that we could somehow procure a ton of this Gruner Veltliner. Not having any experience, he said, well, you could just call a winemaker like Steve Clifton and he will make it for you. So these things happen a lot. It's just we kind of created space for this idea, and we didn't dream that it would turn into such a full-time thing. It started as a little project, maybe, a barrel or two of wine, as a lot of people do, but it really has, it really came to fruition when, as we were doing that, there were issues with those grapes, and then we found our farm, our little vineyard property here in Los Olivos, and we came across this, and it became available, and we looked at each other and we were like, well, if we go back to LA and we don't put an offer on this house with a little vineyard, we'll never know what could have happened. And it was kind of like that, we're watching that Oscar winning film, Everything Everywhere at Once. I mean, if you never know where you're going to go, and you could be in an alternate life right now. But
there's a multiverse where, you didn't get
here
the
we
house,
are.
or you didn't meet, or
We're in the
you decided.
Grunerverse.
We're in the
Grunerverse. I love
Definitely.
it. I love it. And speaking of which, if you have not already opened up the 2021 Gruner Veltliner, please go ahead and enjoy it along with us. And Allison, apparently you stumped everybody with your questions. So if you want to,
disappointed in all of you, I really am.
if you want to,
I thought it was an easy question, but
you live here.
We have had at least, I don't know, we're almost up to a dozen Santa Ynez producers,
including Kathy Joseph, who has joined us last year.
and every single one of them stresses this every time they talk about what makes Santa Ynez special. So am I supposed to give it away now?
Yeah, I think you can reveal
here,
the answers
here.
at this
Oh,
point.
oh,
I'm
right. So Carrie's
I know he knows. It's
Santa
Barbara County is home to the only transverse mountain range in North America. And that means that while most mountains go north and south, in Santa Barbara County, they go east to west, which is how that beautiful ocean air is able to travel across the valley from the Santa Rita Hills to Happy Canyon, warming up as it goes along, so that for every mile you travel east, you get a degree warmer, so that when you're in the beautiful area where they are, it is warmer than, let's say, Fiddlehead, where we had tasted with Kathy, where they do Pinot. Here you can get Rhone varieties, and then clearly you can get Austrian varieties as well.
Yes.
And so this Gruner that is actually from Spear Vineyard, which is from the Santa Rita Hills. So we make a classic white, which is the cooler climate is more appropriate for that. So that would be more Austria, I guess, if you put it on the map like that.
Yeah. So the Gruner from there is, so it's west side of Santa Rita Hills, but they said they planted it in what they thought was the coolest area. And, people are always, they're astounded. They're like, oh, well, it's so, the weather is so different in Austria than it is in California. And it's like, well, you don't really understand Santa Rita Hills, basically, because it's bordered on three sides by the Pacific Ocean. It's an extremely unique area, and as romanticized by the movie Sideways, and but that was specifically like, oh well, Pinot grows here, Chardonnay grows here. Well, tell you what, Gruner grows really well here too. Basically, a lot of things grow well in Santa Barbara County, and you just have to, if you want to grow Cab, you go farther east, and if you want to grow Chardonnay and Gruner, you go farther west. Basically.
You could probably grow any grape in Santa Barbara,
any grape,
right?
any.
And it seems like they are. I mean, obviously, in Ballard Canyon, you've got your patches of your Rhones, your Syrahs, your Grenaches, your Mourvedres. As you move into Happy Canyon, a little warmer, that's where you find a lot of your Bordeaux. I haven't seen a ton of.
To see anyone do Zinfandel.
That's
true.
true.
Which is a shame, because I think Zinfandel, think people think, oh, well, Zinfandel needs to be this huge jammy wine. But I think a cool climate Zinfandel is a pretty cool thing for
Or
sure.
maybe that's our next
Yeah,
project.
I also haven't
most
seen a lot of like the Spanish, I wonder if it's not hot enough to do like a Tempranillo or
There's some
Graciano.
Tempranillo here.
Maybe Kenya should work.
There's
for that.
definitely Graciano.
Is there? Okay.
Right,
There,
yeah.
there's a lot of
I haven't seen any
by
Menthea
mistake.
grown anywhere in the,
Mm.
But as far as Gruner, so it's getting more and more popular, and we have the pleasure of pouring Gruner for people, and it is surprising how many people just that they're familiar with it, because I guess it really has been on people's radar. And I mean, this Gruner, as with, you'll find with domestic Gruners compared to Austrian Gruners, there's a little more ripeness, a little more wideness in the mid. So like, I mean, obviously, if you love Gruner, you love just the raciness, the acid of Gruner.
lateness, that
Yeah,
super
so-
minerality and the steeliness.
Oh, in the
Mhm.
minerality, which is just so unique to Austria. But for us, so we're always trying to retain that acidity, basically. So we're picking at a very we're trying to pick it lean because we want to make sure that acidity is still with us. But there's always more ripeness and more roundness that comes through, that I think makes it actually really pleasing, especially for acid hounds like us. We're like, oh, it's got to have acid, but a lot of people are like, that's too much acid. So these wines really become more palatable in a way because they have a little bit more roundness to them,
Yeah.
I'm curious if I can ask about Gruner. You were saying that you're growing it over. I mean, it grows. I know a lot of people who have planted over in the Santa Rita Hills area. Is Gruner a grape that can grow in warmer areas too, or does it really succeed in cooler climates only?
I think people go for the typical Wachau Gruner, and I mean I know even they're worried about climate change because it already is changing the flavor profile now. So it's so we grow Gruner here, which in Los Olivos, which is more like if you compare it to the old world, it would be the Rhone region. And so we make a skin fermented Gruner out of because we think it's a better expression of it.
Well, I actually don't think that the climate is that different from our vineyard to the Spear vineyard, to tell you the truth. The Los, especially we're kind of north facing, we're northwest facing, and we're kind of down in a gully. It gets really cold, and the Gruner does pretty well here, basically, but Santa Ynez, so the other point though is I think Gruner as compared to more, I don't think it's a fussy grape, basically, like it doesn't respond like it doesn't, it's still Gruner. There's a lot of latitude as far as I think where it can be grown.
It's more like flavor profiles of Granny Smith versus a more riper apple,
Got it. Yeah, but there are subtle differences depending on the soil, but you're getting a lot of the same components no matter where you plant it. This is a 21 from Spear, but you also mentioned that at your deLaski vineyard, which we'll talk a little bit more about when we get to the Blaufränkisch, you have some Gruner planted there. Is your ultimate goal to move completely to deLaski vineyard Gruner, or are you planning on working with both vineyards?
Yes, yeah, for sure. As Anna mentioned, what we really love. So we have a biodynamic vineyard here. We were talking about the sheep. We're a small. We have a 12-acre property, and now it's as I mentioned, when we first got this property, there were 3 acres of Syrah planted, and it's not a lot, and so we planted 2 more acres. So it's not a huge property, and so we really like the idea of having our home property. We call it deLanda, actually. deLanda
right.
Vineyard.
My fault. I apologize. Yes.
Well, it's close because it's a combination of our last name, deLaski, and Anna and David, so it goes to deLanda. So we're working full time on this little 5-acre vineyard, and so that's really our estate grapes, but we really love to kind of stretch out and explore some other, as long as they're organic at the very minimum. We really enjoy working with these other vineyards because it really gives us the ability to kind of spread out a little bit, basically. So no, the goal is to keep it, we want to keep it small overall. We don't have more than about 2,500 cases in a year, basically, and some of it's estate. But then we're working with some other organic vineyards.
And yeah, so I think we are like, it's only 5 acres out of the 12 that are vineyard, but we like it that way because the idea of biodynamic is also that it's not monoculture, that we have like room for hedgerows, for native plants, we have room for pastures for the animals. There's oak trees, we don't want to destroy all the everything that is here on this property to just put like rows and rows of vineyard on here.
Yeah, it's a true ecosystem, which is
Totally.
important to maintain in there. When was your first vintage of Gruner?
2012.
Mhm.
So
Okay. And you mentioned that Steve Clifton was the winemaker for you guys?
yeah, so we basically tapped him. So like I said, the idea kind of came about to basically source a little bit of Gruner, and lo and behold, we had lunch with Steve. We loved his Palmina wines. Obviously, he's very famous from brewer Clifton wines, but the Palmina wines were, he was solely focused on Italian varietals, and we were like, well, we've got the idea to make some Gruner, and he's like, yeah, I'd love to help you. And we looked at each other. We were kind of like, well, why? Okay, great. You'll help us. What? But Steve, why do you need us to make Gruner? And he said, well, it's your story. He's like, this is what, it's just like if I made Gruner, it would just be weird, basically, but it makes sense, basically. And so we learned that and it's the same thing that to be passionate and dedicated to a certain aspect of wine and focus yourself around your story, because otherwise you're just like everyone else out there. It made us very unique, so that when we walked into places and introduced ourselves in this first wine, it kind of made sense, and it made people go, oh wow, you've got a Gruner, and Anna being from Austria, it all kind of made sense in the story, essentially.
No,
You mean you were walking in the room with another Cabernet?
Right, another Chardonnay, another Pinot Noir, and
look, kids, Santa Barbara Syrah. Oh wait,
right.
sorry, we're getting into that.
But we do make Syrah, we do make Pinot Noirs, we make those as well, but the focus on the Austrian varietals was really what kind of made it special for us.
So at what point did you guys take over the winemaking of it? And when you did, I'm interested in how much control you had over Steve at that point. Were you kind of guiding his hand in terms of what you thought the Gruner should be? And then once you took control, were you kind of working with what the grapes gave you, or had you gone to Austria and talked to Austrian winemakers and tried to make it in a very similar style to over there?
So Steve was very open to, like, he wanted to like understand what we wanted to do. Of course, he was a winemaker, and we were, and so also at this same time, we acquired this property with 3 acres of Syrah. So we're just like deer in the headlights at this point. We're just like, and so his vineyard manager, like, he really just helped us those first couple of years. We just, but when you live the life of like on the vineyard and you're seeing everything, and these amazing, talented, vineyard manager, winemaker. They're doing everything, and we're looking over their shoulder at everything. I mean, we were there for these first two vintages. I think by the third vintage, the 15 vintage, a lot of people, like, they hire a winemaker and they have a vineyard, and they don't get involved. And we were always there. We always wanted to be a part of everything, and we looked over his shoulder to do it, doing everything. And he was very gracious. I mean, it's amazing he didn't kick us out, but he let us stay. And we eventually, instead of us looking over his shoulder, he just started looking over our shoulder and said, here's everything you need. And of course, he's busy with everything else, basically, like everything he has to do. So we were able to just really move into more of where he became the consulting winemaker. And then, of course, he we just eventually got our own place and started to just do it ourselves. So it was, again, a lot of serendipity and a lot of grace and sheer luck that that someone like him was open to helping us, and we were able to start out that way.
And we took some classes with Davis at Davis as well, but you really learn the winemaking in the cellar, and it's like the classes were much more like industrial style, and it's very much a boutique, like very low intervention winemaking. We don't use commercial yeast or very limited amounts of sulfur, and so I'm very grateful for Steve. That he was our mentor.
And so we were lucky with him because he only used we only want to use native yeast. We only want to farm organically. And he's not a Davis grad. He learned just by doing, he was just a pioneer here, and he was a kid and with Greg Brewer, and they just figured it out basically. And they learned from, Sanford and all these other guys basically. Right. So we just kind of carried that torch along. But once we really got to understand winemaking, we started to want to make wine less. Like, we did not want to make the wine. We wanted to let the vineyard express itself and do as little as possible. We were always asking questions like, well, why do we want to do this? Like, really, a lot of it's just for insurance, like adding a whole bunch of sulfur or a whole bunch of other stuff. You're just, buying stuff from,
you're turning the additive salesman away at the door, basically, and saying, we really do not want your business. No soliciting. Right. Tap the sign.
And at that same time, I think there's really been an awareness and an understanding of like what it means to be I'll use the N word, but it's natural winemaking, basically. Well, yeah, no, that's
we know. Yeah.
I can say that N word. So natural winemaking. Some people like think, oh, well, this is a disaster that it's just all natural, but so is DRC is natural, basically. Right. There's nothing better than just a wine that was made with really no additives, and it's really an expression of terroir,
Mm-hmm. Nice. So are you guys kind of adhering to traditional Austrian, all stainless steel on this, or? Well,
they do tend to stop mallow, and so they have to hit it with quite a bit of sulfur, basically. Like it depends on which Austrian winemaker, but I think the typical Austrian winemaker would use a whole hell of a lot more sulfur to stop mallow. And
we're definitely cal-austrian winemakers. We're in California. We're not going with the tradition necessarily.
Sure.
So we don't stop mallow. So that's a big difference from the Wachau, I think. But we do make our our field blend, our white field blend is in steel barrels, but also neutral oak. So either way we go.
So yeah, this Gruner is all in stainless steel. I think it makes sense for sure. Yeah, in the Riesling too. If we've got the Coquelicot Riesling, if you all want to
Yeah, we can transition over to that.
So is
Um,
everyone opening all the wines tonight, or
Some are, some aren't, but it's always good to they can always hit pause if they're listening to it later on and
that's
for
right.
the next wine. Before we get into the Riesling though, we always love to find out what food pairings you guys traditionally pair with the Gruner. Gruner, of course, one of those mythical wines that can pair with artichokes and asparagus. So you always hear, those are the ones to pair with Gruner. But what do you guys like to pair with your Gruner Veltliner?
So yeah, I mean, to that's like so it always is a great in between, like it's a great salad course wine, for or veggies. But I think Gruner and Riesling are both great, like with pork and chicken with like breading, like schnitzel, basically. Like you really,
And salad for the vegans.
right. But
Yes,
I mean,
thank you.
or deep fried mushroom, like you can make a schnitzel out of mushrooms, portobello.
Yeah.
But to really have that nice fried, whatever it is, chicken, and to go with the acidity of this, it just kind of makes your mouth water, basically.
Yeah.
That's
That was my initial thought, was like a classic, sorry, Mike and Jeannie, cover your ears, but a classic Wiener Schnitzel with this, or you use your Beyond Veal to make your Wiener Schnitzel.
for sure.
that'll work
And
too.
and I think that speaks to Gruner and Riesling as well. Maybe the Riesling a little more so, but both of them, if you've got a good Gruner, that works as well.
Yeah.
Mm.
So transitioning over to the Riesling, obviously very different styles of winemaking when it comes to German Riesling versus Austrian Riesling. German has so many levels of classification, the, Auslese, the Trockenauslese, Cabinet, Trockenbeerenauslese, which is always fun to say. But Austria doesn't have that. I know with the Gruner, they have the Federspiel and the Schmargard, and there are some different classifications, but not so much on the Riesling. So take us through I'm sure I butchered that name, I apologize. But take us through the differences between German Riesling and Austrian Riesling. Because to be honest, when we offered this, I had a lot of folks who were, is it sweet?
Right.
Is it dry? And I had to be like, yes, it says dry Riesling on the label.
On the label.
Do we
You
still
say,
say
right.
it on the label?
Yeah,
no, totally.
that's the funnest thing for me. So you've got to think of Austria and in Alsace as they really mainly want it in one flavor, dry, basically. And when they say dry, they mean dry. It's not like I've had some, Trocken German Rieslings that's
they still have
there's
like 4 to 5 grams per liter of residual sugar on them.
Yeah. So right. So typically you're going to get a dry Riesling, and there's not all these classifications of varying sugars, basically. So that's my main takeaway, and we love nothing better than to basically have someone in our tasting room who's poo-pooing Riesling because they think it's sweet, and I'm like, no, try it, really. And then they're like buying bottles of it. They're like so surprised by it. So it's really fun for us to basically, we always say that the Germans, living in a much, in a very cool climate. I mean, they must have like left, the acid must have been so high in the Riesling that they just started to traditionally, let's leave sugar to offset the Riesling.
But on the other hand, that's why it's such a great grape for here, because it keeps the acidity so well, and so I think it does amazing here, amazingly here. So because we don't add any acid in the winemaking process, so having a grape that keeps it nice, then and it can ripen it a little more.
Right. So I mean, what's interesting is I think in America the concept, it kind of became like, oh well, Riesling is this great because I mean, Americans love their Coca-Cola and their sweet wines. I mean,
bourbon, exactly.
we live in a bubble. I think basically most wine drinkers in America are drinking sweet, muscat, and they're drinking sweet wines, basically. Even their red wines are sweeter than, and it's amazing because they think that they don't like sweet wine. Well, I mean, some people like sweet wines, and I get people coming in saying, do you have sweet wines? And sometimes we'll pour this for them and they'll be like, there's a difference between fruity and sweet. And people always kind of, to me, sweet is something that if you're still getting sweet on the finish, that's a sweet wine. If you're getting something sweet on the nose and the front palate, and then you're getting something crisp and acidic on the finish, that's a dry wine.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. One of the things I noticed about this is there's not the traditional, if you want to call it petrol or model airplane glue. It doesn't have that nose that so many German Rieslings, whether they're Trocken, Auslese, whatever level of dryness they are.
Still really young.
It's a baby, Chris. Give it some time. Be like,
Petrol is
I can't believe, what are you, 4 years old? You're not driving a car yet? It's like, give it some time.
Yeah, Chris, you never get petrol on a young Riesling. That's aged Riesling.
Yeah,
I've had some young ones that I found that,
yes.
will have that prominent. And I had been told back when I had my wine shop, there was a German producer who came to our shop and actually talked about how he believed that the petrol was a flaw in Riesling that was due to incorrect canopy management. So basically they were letting the grapes not get fully ripe. They were putting too much of a canopy on there, which is what kept that petrol in.
There's a specific phenol, there's a specific chemical in that grape that creates that. I don't think it, well, or I don't know, maybe there's some way to do canopy management to accentuate it. And obviously botrytis and things like that might add to.
Right. No, his was if you thinned the canopy, which was what he did, and let the full sun get on the grapes and let them get fully ripe, it would eliminate that phenol and eliminate.
It would eliminate
that flip.
Right.
Yeah, which is what he was striving for. So his theory was that too many of the German Rieslings had too much canopy. They didn't let the grapes get to full ripeness, and that petrol that still remained was a flaw. Whereas if they cut the canopy, let the grapes ripen naturally, it would eliminate that feel. I think it's similar to the same phenolic in like the Loire Cab Francs, that that green note that you get on them. And if you have Cab Franc in warmer environments like here in Paso Robles, you lose a lot of those.
I don't think it's like, or you're talking about like a pyrazine. I think petrol is quite different.
It is. You're right. No, and those
and I'm not sure if this guy. It's like, yeah. I mean, everyone's got a theory, but obviously, definitely, as Allison's saying, the petrol notes come out much more with age, basically, for sure.
But that's also very typical Austrian. So that's, we make California wine, but Austrian wine, there's a joke that we like to drink the wine when it's still on the grapes. Like we like young wine.
Yeah.
So I do.
They don't believe in aging wines.
Because we drink it before it can age. So.
Yeah, because the Russians apparently steal it before.
Right.
That's right.
So the Coquelicot, can you, I can never say
Coquelicot.
Coquelicot. That's an organic vineyard, right? Or is it biodynamic?
Organic.
Certified organic. And it's a great site. It's in the Los Olivos district. So you've got gravelly loam, but it's down, it's just below, as you drive by the Mission in Solvang, if you just look to your right, like down, like the
riverbed.
That's where the riverbed is, and the vineyard and the Alisal golf course is right down there in the riverbed. So every morning, all the fog just like settles down there, basically. So we've got a great site and really good acidity on those grapes, because they're really ripening slowly. It's like, of course, you think, oh, it's Santa Ynez Valley and it's not Santa Rita Hills, so it's going to be hot, but it's not hot there. Basically, it's nice and cool, and a lot of great fog and stuff keeps the grapes nice and nice and racy and retains the acidity. The ripeness isn't extreme. I mean, this year, I mean, wow, yeah, 13%. Usually we're between 12 and 13. And that's the way we like it.
Nice. So was this a vineyard that you sought out because they were organic and growing Riesling, or was it that they had Riesling and then you kind of helped shepherd them into the organic side of things?
No, they were already organic, so.
Okay.
They were
But-
organic and Riesling.
Yes.
So we found them and started. So we started, we started with the Gruner, and then we sort of bounced around with, from the very beginning, everyone was like, well, you got to make some Riesling. And there were quite a few, I mean, there were actually some vineyards from the 70s. I mean, the first year, Steve had been an assistant, or I think even the winemaker at Rancho Sisquoc at one time. He was very good friends with them. So our first vintage of Riesling was Rancho Sisquoc, and we got the grapes for a song at that point. I mean, no one wanted to make Riesling in 2012 at all, basically. Right. And so it was, they couldn't get rid of it, basically. And again, a great site, really good. But it's we bounced around to, we used Riverbench one year, but then once we started to use Coquelicot, we really came to a decision point, and I think it really did come with, wow, we're getting great Riesling from these sites, but the grapes aren't organic, and our whole mission is organic, and it's very confusing if you're like, okay, we do all these organic wines, but this isn't organic. It's like, well, you've just got to create the whole line has to be organic, and we've made that decision, and so that kind of created the focus on organic, and really working with that site became the focus for sure, because it's got a great site, and it's organic. So
yeah. And by that time you had established Solminer, you had a name, a reputation, so it was probably easier to approach them and get grapes at that point, I imagine.
Mhm.
Again, I feel like the first year we got it, I think Riesling's gotten so much more popular.
True. Yeah, you're getting things before the trend. It's very good. You're like investing in tech stocks and 97.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the price on those grapes have gone up. I think that Coquelicot Vineyard they've definitely over the last, so we've been working with them since 2017. So I guess, in the last 6 years, 6 to 8 years, that vineyards, they have their own estate program. They sell their own wine, but they have much more, they have 150 acres. They have a lot more than they want to produce, essentially. So
Plus they have a hotel and a couple of restaurants.
Yep.
They're very popular. Have you considered doing a sweeter Riesling, or doing a Riesling that allows some residual sugar for that audience, or are you definitely sticking with more
fermentation? No,
that's a fair answer, but
no, I
wouldn't know how to do it. I don't know.
it can be stuck. No, but we prefer the dry wines. There's we know there's a couple of wineries we can send people to that.
There you go. Not our problem. Just go on your way.
Yeah, it's like we'd have to stop the fermentation, I guess, at some point. So it's like,
if it was in Germany, I would consider. I remember having one German Riesling that was dry, and it was, and I love acid, but it was so acidic that I can see why they leave residual sugar if you're in a colder region of Germany. So,
yeah.
but here we don't need it.
But yeah, I mean, a good off dry, if you've got the right, if you've got really high acidity and a little bit of, like 12 12 to 20 grams of residual, it's like that's a lovely wine for sure. So
Yeah.
I'm just not sure if we're the ones that
We'll
are.
get them from Germany or somewhere.
Yeah, somebody else can handle that. That's not your core customer.
But it would sell. We got people coming in once a week looking for sweet wine, but we send them to.
Every winery does, it feels like. It's just the way it goes. So Larry and Sandy and Scott loving the dry Riesling, and they all say let the sweet wine lovers go somewhere else. So we talked.
But I just want to defend for a second. I'm not encouraging them to make a sweet Riesling or a wine with residual sugar, but do not knock sweet wines. Well-made wines with residual sugar are freaking amazing.
In high acid,
High
the
acid.
and sour of it are actually pretty amazing. But the problem is you've probably only had bad sweet wines, basically. But they're definitely see, that's the thing. I think it's a much harder wine to make. It's like I don't think I can do it.
Yeah, because I mean, when you're thinking about German Riesling with the highest searing acidity, think of Italian, like even like a really well-made Moscato or Brachetto.
Or an Alsatian Gewürztraminer.
Well-made one. Yeah, I mean, it's that acidity's got to be off the rock that you don't even realize how searing the acidity is because the sweetness rounds it out.
Totally, absolutely.
Right.
I completely
Or
agree.
you're not getting the sweetness because the acidity is so high. So you're kind of like in this perfect spot. Yeah,
Add a little spicy food and wow, you're in good shape.
that's a tough wine to make.
Sweet and sour pork. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Nice. So speaking of food, again, you mentioned that the Gruner and the dry Riesling have quite a bit of crossover when it comes to the food business. Or anything specific or special that you would pair with the Riesling?
So I think for sure, like some spicy Thai food, like you've definitely got amazing, like anything Asian influenced really goes nice with that nice fruit and you've got great fruit and that nice acidity. So a lot of things that wouldn't normally go with wine, sushi and Thai food and things like that. This is perfect.
Also, I know that that Larry and Sandy were saying they love the dry Riesling. I think it has such a beautiful kind of chalky acidity. It lingers and there's this chalkiness on the finish that, your mouth is watering and you're like, oh, wow. I'm still tasting, it's a beautiful, beautiful wine.
Oh, thanks.
Nice. Beautiful. Let's move on to the Carbonic Syrah 2021.
I'm a big fan of this wine too, so
Yes. And I have to say, this is the second wine we have. I guess we didn't feature the first one in our wine club, but it came up. But there was a winery that also featured a kicking donkey on the label. So it's a
this is our donkey.
Popular
This is Molly, the Wonder Donkey. She's in the backfield here. So we want to memorialize her on the label basically. But yeah, this is fun. Hopefully you put a little bit of a chill on it. I think that's really kind of key for this wine. Obviously it's the the lightest Syrah you'll ever enjoy for sure. And it just has such an immediacy of like just fresh grape juice, essentially. That's just like what we love about it. There's absolutely no additions to this wine. This was so carbonic maceration for most people need a little bit of an explanation. It's typically what they do in Beaujolais with Gamay. So it's the idea of actually almost no maceration. So you're not really crushing the grapes at all or punching them down. So we're putting them into a steel container. In this case, we just put them directly into our press, which we can seal, and we basically let it sit and start fermentation for about 12 days. So it's mostly fermented without us really even touching it. So you're basically seriously reducing the tannins and the skin contact. And so you're getting all fruit, you're getting whole cluster, so you're getting a tertiary note, but the tannins, it's very bright, lively, fruity, but it's nice and dry and lovely. So then we just press it into some neutral oak barrels and let it hang out for 2 months, a couple of months, and we bottle it in December. So it's a nouveau wine basically as well. So, and we don't add any sulfur or anything to it. So it's meant to be
Enjoyed young.
yes, we drink it in celebration of the almost the harvest basically. And so this we made a lot in 2021. This is probably some of the last of it. It actually, so it's been aging over the last year, and it actually develops. There's something funny that happens all of a sudden. I think of this as just a one. It's sometimes carbonic wines and these light chillable reds are very one note, but I think this has so much intricacies, and there's a lot going on in this wine, even though it's a very light, red wine.
Yeah. Well, and what I love about it is even around the edges of my glass, like you can see little bubbles formed. So it has that natural effervescence where even in the bottle, and this is a 21, so it's had a little more time in bottle, but you're still getting that that sort of secondary fermentation that's happening there.
There's a little so again, we call it the freshness because what we've learned in our wine journey is we love these fresh wines that trying to, as wine ferments, the CO2 comes out of the wine, and you let it sit there long enough until the CO2 is gone, and then it's wine. Well, what if you bottle it before all the CO2 is gone from the wine? You get it still in the bottle. And of course, when you try our pet nats, that's sparkling wine. This isn't a sparkling wine, but there's still this effervescence, this little spritziness to it. It just feels a little spiky on the tongue. And so it's fresh.
Yeah, no. And even a year in, it's still retaining it, which is phenomenal. It's not something that, has sort of just through micro oxidation through the cork has kind of blown off. It's still there and still lively and fresh and wonderful, which is phenomenal with this. Was it always your intention to? I know this is from the deLanda Vineyard. So these are this is not.
No, this is.
I need to read your bottles more is what I need to.
Right. No, I need to read my bottle too. It changes. Typically the carbonic we're getting this vintage was a combination. This year we actually had some Syrah from a Ballard Canyon vineyard and from the Coquelicot vineyard as well. It had great acidity. We're also picking this kind of early. It has good acidity, so it really lends to this style of wine. But intentions were thrown to the wind at some point. When as we became more and more interested in what makes a good natural wine. Obviously a wine that gets into the bottle early is a great and has great acidity and great freshness, is a great natural wine because it doesn't have chance to go bad. Basically we put it in the bottle, and it's really, to me, this fun, easy drinking. I guess our intentions.
Summer at the pool.
Yeah,
wine.
I mean, our intentions sort of started to shift, and maybe it's also like an Austrian ethos of drink your wines young,
Sure.
and we want to enjoy life, and we want to enjoy these wines, and we don't want to sit around waiting for our wine to age. Basically, we're not getting any younger.
We're doing that
Yes.
ourselves.
I guess that's why we'll never know if natural wines have ageability.
You should try our 2016 skin fermented Gruner. It's actually, and we have a 2017 of this. It's delicious.
Nice.
I think what's really fascinating about this wine and what made me fall in love with it the first time I tried it is It is that freshness, and it does have that kind of lightness to it, but it's got such a savoriness to it at the same time that it's like there's an intensity to it, but it's not a weightiness. It's like, you know, it's got a little oomph to the lightness.
Mhm.
For sure. For sure. And it's, yeah, that's what I mean about some carbonic red, some chillable reds. They're just very one note. It's almost just like watered down red wine. But this has a whole thing going on. I'm getting all these cool
I
menthol
think that
notes
is
too.
that is part of natural wines, because we don't fine or filter, because every time you fine or filter, you also lose like specific flavors, and
Mhm.
there's just more complexity if you do less.
Yeah,
And-
you do get a little bit of the wine's obviously not completely clear, so you're getting more mouthfeel from a little bit of the lees that are still in there, basically, and that makes it even cooler.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to watch sort of the hot wine style of the moment, because it went from pet nat, it felt like, to, you know, skin contact orange wine, to carbonic. And I feel like, you know, it seems like a lot of different people are doing carbonics. I think at this point I've now had at least half a dozen, if not more, different varietals done in a carbonic style, from, you know, your Syrah, Grenache, I've had a Graciano, I've had a Mourvedre, I've had a Cinsault, mostly Rhones, obviously. Nobody's
Obviously.
braved the carbonic cab yet, but you know, I'm sure
Carbonic cab. Yeah,
it's still young.
but yeah, no, for us, yeah, like we said, we did it once in 2017 and never looked back. It was delicious. So
Again,
it's just
ahead of the curve, you guys.
well,
are.
it's
That's-
just we got interested in these things, and yeah, I think you're right. It was a little earlier on, and we tried a little bit of it, and we were like, this is delicious. So we just kept doing it, and we're looking around, we're like, wow, everyone else is doing this now. But you know, that's fine too, because now we're not, you don't come to us and say, what is this? You know, it's like, well, we've had all these other ones. It's just, you know, so that's great.
Some
What
people
do you-
think it's carbonated.
yeah, like a forced carbonation. What are you guys working on now, so I can, you know, buy stock in those secondary and tertiary industries? So
Yeah, right.
Oh, right.
because you're so
Big
ahead of
thing.
the curve.
It's so funny, Chris. I mean, we're really not trying to
Big cabs.
figure out like what's the coolest
No.
you know, canned wine. No, we did a can of Paquette last year, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
We're-
Another hot trend that, again, you guys were
Yeah,
kind of ahead of the curve on.
and we just had to try it, basically.
Yeah.
And but I thought it'd be cool to put it like because Anna's like, I don't want to drink one out of a can, but I'm like, yeah, but do you want to drink Paquette out of a
No, Paquette
out of a
is-
can? And
It's not wine,
right.
so it's
So it's a wine beverage, basically.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
so that to me made sense. Taking the can concept and the Paquette concept and putting it together, that's cool. But no, we really want to focus more and more on our vineyard and what we're doing in our farming. We've really been and I, you know, hopefully we're trailblazers on this too, is really creating an environment where we're using absolutely no sprays, organic or otherwise, other than just compost teas, and supporting the health of a vineyard without you know, any sort of, you know, chemicals or even outside fertilizers and things like that. So so that's really our focus, is on terroir and our you know, there's always going to be fun wines and fun pet nats and things like that to do, but I think we're really focused on this little space, and we're in a good place right now. And I think it's the next, you know, wine that we're doing is a red field blend that just uses, so we have a new grape that we've been propagating. It's another Austrian grape. It's a red grape called Saint Laurent.
Oh yeah.
And that's we have a very small amount of it. And so we've been just trying to propagate that, and then seeing how it blends with our Syrah and our Blaufränkisch, and just creating a red wine that really just expresses our place. You know, I think in California we're very varietally like obsessed, you know, but it's just like, this is our place. These are the grapes that grow here, so why not create a field blend out of that? Basically, that's.
I always like the analogy of like they're all like immigrants, you know, like, and it's like, it's, you know, many people are just so focused on the French varietals, and I think there's so many different areas where, like California, there's people from all over the place. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I would like that one.
No,
Yeah,
I think most of the grapes that are here in California, you know, 99.9% of them are immigrants that were brought over here from other places. So
And I'm
outside of
really-
like Norton, you know.
Yeah,
this is-
Totally.
so
I am
the
interested in
Italians,
the native ones too, though. I'm really
Yeah.
curious about those too.
Sure, yeah.
So you're gonna be planting some Chamberson pretty soon, or
Get
some
into some mission grapes.
Vidal Blanc.
I mean, I wrote a story recently about, you know, the people focused on Italian grapes in California, like Steve Clifton and others. And one of the questions I said at the beginning is like, why? There's no reason why Italian grapes shouldn't be part of the norm of our lives.
Yep.
It was Italian immigrants who came here and settled in California. It was the first people to make wine. The grapes thrive here. The same with Austrian. And as we find all these other grapes, there's no reason why French grapes need to monopolize
Right.
our vocabulary of what grows here.
Totally.
Yeah.
Especially, and like Austria is definitely a little different ecosystem, but this is Mediterranean climate. Italian would be perfect.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
agree.
And there have been success stories in that. Like Albarino is a grape that, you know, 15, 20 years ago, nobody had really heard of it. There were a few plantings here in California, but it wasn't widely available. And now it feels like it's really taken off as a grape that's planted. I think Gruner is another one. I feel like every year there seem to be more and more, especially in Monterey County, it feels like there's more Gruner being planted in cooler environs up there, even up in Sonoma and whatnot. So I think go ahead.
We love, I love Albarino. We have this Ria Spacious Albarino that's just delicious. So,
But it's such a delicious grape. So, you know, but Albarino, it's these, you know, highly aromatic with tropical notes. I mean, you've got Albarino, Malvasia. So we grow some Muscat as well. So we do a field blend, a skin fermented field blend. The Muscat didn't make sense to me until we actually did it with skin fermentation, and then that really like drove it home. So you add Riesling and Gruner and Muscat to that,
and it's dry.
Yes, and it's delicious, basically. So I think all of those highly aromatic grapes with some tropical notes, they really appeal to people, basically, because it's if they're done dry, you've got beautiful, like, you know, fruit and then a nice crisp wine, and those are, you know, those can be really popular wines. I mean, Chardonnay is so boring.
No, it's just
Right. Well,
sorry.
it's white. It's a white canvas. I mean, it's a blank canvas that you can pretty much do anything
And
with.
it expresses terroir quite well.
Right. And I feel Grenache is kind of the same way, where Grenache can be produced in so many different styles, from, you know, very light and strawberry to earthy, tannic, and heavy. And Cab's the same way. It's just a matter of,
In essence, all grapes can go in those extremes, but that doesn't make them the blank canvas that Chardonnay is.
no, it's VHS versus Betamax. You just have to sort of, you know, certain things catch fire for reasons that you can't understand.
How did Chardonnay get so popular? Maybe that's a whole nother Zoom. I don't know. It's just,
Yeah, I think it's because it's the Ronco of grapes. It's like set it and forget it, pretty much.
yeah.
So before we jump into the Blaufränkisch, I do want to take a step back and ask you guys about your labels, because you have such cool designs on your labels. Who does the designing of them? You know, kind of walk us through the symbolism. Obviously, you guys have your little logo with the gentleman, you know, tilling the earth. So take us through what goes into your labels.
So we started just like everything else, not really. So I come from the music business. So, to me, this was
You're the one responsible for those cure tickets being 4 times as expensive as they should be.
No. I was a producer, had my own record label, but to me, it's just like this is the album cover, so it's like, we're not going to do something boring. It's got to be something interesting. So we tapped our friends who are artists in the beginning when we started Solminer, and we started throwing around ideas. And unfortunately, one of those ideas was each wine had to have a different label on it.
Yes.
But that's
a TTB nightmare.
But right, totally. But it needed to somehow sort of like everything needed to sort of tie together. So we sort of have almost like, these are some of the first labels that we did, and they're sort of mandalic and circular in feel. And so our friends were
Rebecca. Bughouse.
Rebecca and Jeff, yes, they have a studio called Bughouse. So they really helped us with those. And then we have the Donkey label, and we have a few wines. These tend to represent the more kind of funky natural wines. Our skin fermented wines are under this label. So they differentiate just a little bit in style. So the style of the label differentiates, but I think everything tells a story. I mean, like you said, this is the original, like the sun and the guy kind of digging in the dirt. He's
actually a cordon. That's a vine.
Oh, okay.
He's our
I can see that,
original
yes.
Solminer. And then we have a number of labels for the that represent the Blaufränkisch, our Grenache, our Syrah. We have a Syrah that it's almost like a grape that has a moon kind of superimposed. So I think a lot of these just tell the story of nature and the cosmos sort of happening, and that's kind of our
sun digging in the dirt. But yeah, like on every label there's the guy with the shovel. Like I always joke, like, if you can't find the guy with the shovel anymore, we won't serve you any more wine. But it's also interesting because you kind of look like the guy now.
Do I? Or
yeah, like,
does the guy look like me?
Oh, it took me a minute to find him on the Blaufränkisch, but I finally located him. So yes.
Where did you come up with the name Solminer? I mean, I understand the meaning, but what was the impetus for naming the wine Solminer?
Right. So soul and money. So we had to come up with a name, obviously, but it was like we found ourselves like, well, what are we really doing here? So the first incarnation of the name was Solminer, SOUL, but we decided the U should be silent, basically. So maybe it's soil, soul, and sun is all kind of combining together. And you're digging in the dirt, and maybe you're doing a little self-reflection as well, basically.
And the soul, like the cosmic influences too. Like now that we're like also biodynamic, actually, we came up with that name before we even decided to go into biodynamics, but it works perfectly.
We did a pretty good job.
Yeah,
I don't know.
all that
well done. All around.
It's actually pretty funny when and I've had the pleasure to sit down and talk with you many a time, so I'm aware of your knowledge and how you can talk about this. But you said your first vintage was in 2012, and it's just funny to think, like, a couple goes up to Santa Barbara and they have a wine and they fall in love, and let's make a barrel. And 11 years later, look how knowledgeable you are.
Yeah.
Look how much.
When you do something every day for a decade, you get good at it.
It's the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours thing, right?
If you don't get good at it, maybe you shouldn't be doing it. So I guess we're still doing it. So,
and I have to throw this out. I don't expect you to remember it, but in 2014, they held what at the time was the Wine Bloggers Conference, now the Wine Media Conference.
I remember that.
Up in Buellton. And on the Sunday the conference ended, Brewer Clifton threw an oysters and bubbles event, and you guys were pouring there, and that was
remember
actually the first time I met you and tasted your wines at that point. So I
Wow,
still
we were very green.
yes, as was I. So I still remember that event though. It was
But
it was
but
memorable.
it was amazing the kind of things the community coming together, and when you're starting out here, I think there's a lot of people who truly want to help you to basically be successful. Basically, we're not competing with each other. We want to create a place where people can come and understand wine in a way that they never would if they just bought wine at the grocery store, basically. So we're all in cahoots with each other, basically, and it definitely feels like that. And now it's kind of crazy. 10 years, now I feel like there's younger people now that are, I guess, we'll mentor them, basically.
Yeah.
So it's great.
Yeah, you've been doing this for over a decade now, so you are the teachers.
Right. So it's but that's the thing. Everybody comes here and we're all obsessed with the same thing and trying to figure it out in our own way, from Richard Sanford on up to,
I was my son had in his school, they had something called career day where the parents came in and would speak about the things that they did. And I was after the guy who was working at Vandenberg, like shooting down rockets or space junk, but my
landing rockets on surfboards in the ocean.
I was a little intimidated, but my message to the kids is like, you're never too old to learn something new. Like so you can always learn something new.
I figured the problem was like half the kids have winemakers as parents, so it's career day, and it's just like, oh, again with the Vineyard story, the field trip out to the vines. I know it says. So we're getting close to 8, so let's jump on to our last one. Before we do, though, very quickly, with the Carbonic Syrah food pairings, such a unique wine. What obviously you mentioned throwing, this is a great summer wine, throwing a chill on it. I could see this with like grilled chicken, roasted chicken, things like that.
Throw a mushroom burger or a Impossible burger or an actual beef burger on the barbecue and enjoy it. It's literally a burger wine. I think nothing better than like just good old summertime grill, basically. Is
although I would love some like good grilled linguiça or like merguez sausage, I think would be fantastic with this as well. So that
works for sure.
Yeah, very nice.
Do you want my trivia question, Chris, as we jump into this?
Yes. So Allison has her backup trivia question, if she's so disappointed in everybody. So as we jump into the Blaufränkisch, Allison.
Yeah, now we're going to see how well you read Chris's and my emails. Blaufränkisch in other countries is called something else. There are 2 other names for Blaufränkisch. One of those names was the name officially approved in America. And thank God we got rid of it and can say Blaufränkisch now. But what is the name? What is another name for Blaufränkisch that used to be the official name here in the US?
You can still call it that, can't you?
You can technically, but it was, I think it was only like, it was less than 10 years ago that the TTB officially allowed Blaufränkisch to be put onto the label.
Oh, wow.
And one of my favorite stories is there's a winery up in
Sandy's going in for typing. I see it.
Oh, good. There's a winery up in Lake County called Steel Wines that used to source used to source it from up in Washington. And instead of putting the name on the label, they would just call the wine Blue Frank.
Blue Frank.
Blue Frank. And they actually created, the label was like an old French franc note. But what they would do is every vintage, they would put the photo of someone who helped make that vintage as whatever the president of France was on the middle of it. So it was a very, very clever.
Do you know that's because, do you know what Blaufränkisch translates to?
Blue French?
No, the blue wine of Franconia.
Mhm.
or the blue grape of the Franks. So the Franks were a Frankish grape is like the noble wines. So Riesling is considered a Frankish grape because they figured, well, if it came from the Franks, then it's good, basically. So if it's Frankish, that's a level of, goodness, essentially.
And Sandy, no, sadly, you are incorrect. However, one of my other trivia questions.
Yes, someone got it.
Scott wins.
Scott.
Congratulations, Scott.
I mean, just Google it, guys.
This will be delivered to your house. Actually, this will be delivered to your house in April when we
But
drop off your
Fun
next
fact
round
for Sandy, fun fact for you all, is that Blaufränkisch is the parent grape to 2 grapes, and one of them is Gamay.
Very exciting.
The other is Weigelt, but that's not a common grape here, so.
Well,
So-
wait a minute. Isn't Zweigelt the cross between Blaufränkisch and
Sacre-
Solminer?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I thought.
Yeah, no, Blaufränkisch is the parent to those 2 grapes, is a parent to Gamay and a parent to Zweigelt.
Yeah, I didn't know about the Gamay thing. That's cool.
Yeah.
And I think Lemberg is Lviv in Ukraine, the city of Lviv in.
Oh, that's interesting.
And then the other name of Blaufränkisch is Franconia, which makes sense to what David was talking about.
Well,
Well,
and
and-
Kick Frank.
Yeah, I was going to say Kick Frankos in the Czech Republic is
and or Hungary, Hungary.
Hungary as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it goes
Right.
all the way to Bulgaria. Like, I'm curious. I'd like to try some from.
But yeah,
region.
our plantings, some of our plantings here came from Washington, and the plants were called Lemberger plants, basically. But
So
it's
what-
much like the cheese, basically. So you really
Well, that was the
maybe-
joke, was nobody wanted to put Lemberger on their bottle because
there's
that
a
would
cheese?
equate it with the cheese.
oh,
It's
Limburger.
Limburger is the name of the cheese, but it's close
Limburger
enough.
cheese,
that people
super
would-
stinky cheese.
Oh.
You don't even want to eat the cheese. You wouldn't want to, it's like
That was
like a
Jed
Limburger.
Steele's reasoning for calling the wine Blue Franc, because he didn't want to put Lemberger on the label because people would look at it, equate it with the cheese and go, I don't want a smelly, stinky wine. Like, no.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So obviously,
Totally.
at what point did you decide, we need to have a red to balance out our Gruner Veltliner, and we're going to
Right.
buy this and plant this on our own vineyard?
Totally. That was in 14 was our first
No,
vintage.
So it was 13.
Regrafted.
So we grafted some,
You guys move fast.
I know.
yeah. Well, it's just the whole Austrian thing, like
It was also
was-
raw.
was
We had
like-
to do something.
so, and again, we had help with, so Steve knew like Ken Volk and Pax Mall, and they had
Yeah.
Blaufränkisch.
Ken's was the first one I ever had in
Yeah, and
2003.
so he calls them and gets cuttings. It's just like he can call anybody, and basically like it's so we're like, okay, well, let's take we took a little area and we grafted in.
in 13.
Yeah, well, we actually had a little bit of
Mhm.
Blaufränkisch in 13, and we had a full-on wine, 100% Blaufränkisch in 14. And so then we grafted more Syrah, because Coquelicot's got Syrah. This is the only Blaufränkisch in Santa Barbara County, basically, because I don't think Ken's is farther north.
Yeah, I can't even remember where
and
this was from. Gosh.
So we were really taken by this, and then when we planted our 2 extra acres, it was all to. There's an acre of Blaufränkisch. There's some Riesling. There's some Gruner.
I
but-
always get cassis.
Yeah,
We're
getting
it's so fruity.
Yeah,
It's
we're
got a
getting
lot of purple fruit.
Mhm.
purple or blue fruit.
I was going to
People
say, to
guava.
me, on the palate, this is just like sour blueberries in the best possible
there's-
way,
there-
like
there's
fresh
quite a-
blueberry
right.
juice.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of tartness, especially like it hits you on the first sip, and
Mhm.
it's like, oh, this is really tart, and a little astringent, but then you sort of start to kind of go with it, and you're
Yep.
sort of like, oh, well then, like if you have some food with this, it really has like, yeah, the pairings are pretty interesting. We should discuss pairings on this. For
I do
sure.
think
We absolutely will.
stinky cheese would go well with that, actually.
Oh, for sure.
It would, and what I always love about the Germanic Austria, especially the Austrian reds, Blaufränkisch, Weigelt, is they have this huge kind of fruity burst of flavor up front, but then because of that high acidity, they tend to just really fade off the tongue, clean up very fast. They don't have a long finish, but they're so refreshing. I always like when I had my wine shop, and even to this day, I still tell people that I think Blaufränkisch is the best Thanksgiving wine that's out there, because you have such these heavy flavors that are salty. And so having this like high acid, high fruit content that kind of rushes in, but then falls off the palate immediately it's so refreshing for a
Like the cranberry sauce for the turkey.
exactly. It's basically like a cranberry sauce wine is what you're drinking, which is phenomenal. So,
Yeah, for sure. You really get that almost like it's almost, I think of it as like a grapefruit pith kind of on the finish too, that I think is really
That's
cool.
exactly what it is, because it leaves that bitterness you get when you have grapefruit, that kind of sourness finish. That I think this is a wine that if you don't appreciate that bitterness on its own,
It's not your thing.
have it with cheese. I mean, even with like a creamy goat cheese, I think like the chalkiness of goat cheese could work well with this.
or
Right.
I would even do like a triple cream brie, which has a very mellow, salty flavor.
Right.
Fair. Okay, that's true.
I was going to say the same thing, but yeah, for sure. For some people aren't as like you either really love this wine or maybe it's not your thing. But I think it's definitely so this is the 2020 vintage, and as it ages, I think it really comes into its own. I think this is a wine that could even use a little more aging too, basically. But those really bright fruit flavors, I think as it ages, retain, and the bitterness and the tartness kind of smooths out quite a bit, basically. So
And
that's
walk us through the production of this wine. Is this neutral oak? How are you bringing in
very-
the grapes? How are you producing it?
very simple. It's done without much production at all. Essentially, we're doing a combination of whole cluster and whole and just in destemmed berries, probably about 30% whole cluster. It goes into neutral oak. We don't use any flavored barrels, for anything. It's like that we want to taste the fruit. We don't want to impart any oak aging on it, basically. And then really it's just about 10 months of aging, and then we like to get it in the barrel, or sorry, we like to get it into the bottle out of the barrel, and then let it hang out in the bottle for a few months, and then release it. And it's like I said, it's just got a little bit of sulfurate bottling, and it's just the best production is really no production, basically.
And what sort of ageability do you think this wine has? I mean, we talked about how with Austrians, they love to drink their wines young, but is this one that, you think you can hold on to for a bit? Is it ageable, or is this something that definitely should be drunk in 2 to 3 years?
If you can resist the temptation to drink it, hang on to it for a couple of years.
Tannins, and I think so. I mean, the Carbonic Syrah, that one I would probably drink within a few years. No, we should. We've had the 16 or 15 a while ago. That was delicious. Yeah,
I think this is drinking great right now, but it does still feel a little on the young side. I think it could improve with age over the next 5 years and be delicious over the next 10 years.
Yeah. This is like the sweet tart wine, the old sweet tart candies.
Sure.
Like that's definitely that kind of mid palate flavor that I get on this, which is just wonderful.
That's like the game. It's like, what childhood candy does it remind you of? Basically, it really has a whole
For me, it's picking red currants in my grandmother's backyard.
There you go.
See, and that right there is the difference between America and Europe. Like, what candy from the candy store do we get? And
It's
you're,
like
you
the
know,
lick-a-made stick that.
yeah, exactly. Versus, it reminds me of, fresh currants and blackberries from the fields that I
Pixie
used to hang
sticks.
out in.
It's the pixie sticks. No, it's the.
You had a better life, Anna.
They're
Is
just
anyone-
suburban kids from
Is
America.
anyone watching the new comedy Shrinking?
No, what's
Not
that?
yet.
Oh, it's on
Apple TV
Apple
Plus.
with Harrison
It's-
Ford.
Really?
And Jason Segel. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's-
well, last week's episode, Harrison Ford, they all play therapists, 3 that work but they have their own problems.
Oh, cool.
Shrinking. Got it.
Harrison Ford was introduced to fun dips.
Right.
Oh, look at
The whole
this.
episode is like his new obsession and addiction to fun dip.
Okay.
Yeah. They never really expanded out on fun dips. They just kind of stuck with those main 3 flavors and never, and then it was always a minty stick, which was weird. Like, you don't want a minty stick that went with the, but I digress.
Yeah, right.
So I have to ask you, you guys are co-winemakers for this. So how do you handle the division of labor, the decisions that have to be made? It's all her.
No. I think I think I come in with the organic and biodynamic. That's where I've put my foot down. But when it comes to what barrel or what stainless steel like tank we'll use for what wine, David can make those decisions.
She naturally gravitates towards the farming aspect of it. Like, she's doing all the making sure all the biodynamic certifications and everything. Like, she's in the microscope with the soil samples and doing that's much more. I think it's a little more her world, and then I'm a little bit more like, okay, well, what the mechanics of the winery, I think a little bit more, but it's weird because you get this thing sometimes where people are like, well, then if you're not like the main person in the winery, you're not the winemaker. But I don't feel like I do anything in the winery. Basically, it's literally just plumbing.
Well, it depends
Essentially.
on
But-
where
but
you
the-
think the wine is made. Is the wine made in the vineyard or is the wine made in the winery?
Yeah, I'm just repairing hoses, basically. you
You're
know.
repairing them?
Well, when there's Blaufränkisch leaking everywhere,
So it's like
You have to laugh because if you were to reverse our conversation, rewind just like 3 minutes, Anna grew up picking blueberries. David grew up on the East Coast.
Right.
Who ends up in the vineyard and who ends up in the winery?
Well, he's like the Jimmy Iovine, behind the board, like making sure everything's fine. And she's like the Clive Davis, who's out there, scouting for talent and making sure that everything's ready when they come into the studio. I think that's
Yeah, and when the lambs start to pop out when the sheep start to pop out lambs and there's
No, but and we do
there's-
no, but and then also like when I need help with the sheep, you'll come and help
and
me.
when she
And I'm bottling each. For bottling. I'm in the winery. Like we do it together. So
totally, but yeah, there's been a kind of a little bit of a division just because of what makes sense, but we've always said we do everything together basically, but yeah, sometimes you have to divide and conquer a little bit.
Yeah. Of course, somebody has to be the CEO. You have to.
Oh,
The
she's
decision
CEO.
has to end somewhere at one point.
Yeah,
and,
that's her for sure.
Nice. And then before we, close, I do want to ask, in some of our previous conversations with other wineries, you hear the term ROC, the regenerative organic certification. That's become a very hot style for Vineyard. But it sounds like you guys is that something you're interested in doing or you're looking to doing? I mean, you have a lot of the components already in
we've
place.
done it.
we're the first one in Santa Barbara that
Oh, you are?
got certified 2 years ago.
Oh, well, then
Yes.
there you go.
So no, totally. And
Boom.
it's very much, it's all about soil health. It's all about in animal welfare, in integrating animals. So it has a social justice component. It's very much in line with biodynamics, but it's without the woo-woo part. So I think we need the masses to, change in the next few decades. So yeah, no, we support them too.
So now that you're regenerative, do you no longer do the woo-woo parts of biodynamic, or do you still follow all the biodynamic practices?
No, we do both. And I looked and I used the microscope, for example, to look at the microbiology, like within all the biodynamic, the compost, or like the barrel pit compost or the horn manure. And it's full of microbiology. It's awesome when science confirms, old traditions, basically.
Yeah, we know it's just a way to confirm, we know that it's working. Like ROC is a way to just sort of verify what we've been doing and what we'll continue to do. And it might take a little bit of a different approach, but it's almost the same thing in a certain way. But yeah, we did get the certification. So we're ROC certified as well as biodynamic. And so to us, regenerative organic is so much more meaningful than just organic. I mean, in a certain way, we've come to understand that organic farming is kind of the same as conventional farming, except you're just using organic materials instead of synthetic materials
without the herbicides. And
Right.
but it's a very important first step, because
You
there's
still have a
also
lot of
regenerative-
carbon off, outlays and whatnot, even if you're organic, which you
Right.
don't if you're
even more.
ROC.
And you can have, like, if the things that you can spray could have a really devastating effect on the insect population, for example. So it
Right,
could still
there's-
have a really negative effect on the ecosystem, even though it is derived from a plant.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, and then also there's the whole, no-till and not tilling your vineyard has a huge impact on climate change and the
Honoring the fungus.
the fungus and the microbes in your vineyard, and also with all this rain, you've got a lot of you're preventing erosion and there's just so many benefits to not tilling and things like that. So there's a lot of aspects of regenerative organic that organic farming doesn't even begin to approach, and in certain ways it even goes beyond biodynamics as well.
Carrie wanted to know, are you Demeter certified? And
Yes.
that's one where if you can kind of explain what that certification is and how that differs from ROC or organic.
It's like I said, like they're both regenerative certifications. I think from my experience, Demeter is more appropriate for a small farm like us. Rock is very, it's worldwide, but
Yeah.
I like them both, and we've been certified Demeter since 2018, and we'll continue to do that for sure.
And it sounds like they're similar enough that if you get one, you can probably,
Totally,
it's
like rock.
just a matter of filling out the paperwork and paying.
It just doesn't have the social justice category yet. So,
Got
but
it.
I mean, maybe they changed that too. It's we're all evolving. I mean, making sure that the farm workers are taken care of is definitely an important goal, I think, that the wine industry should have here in.
It seems that
Absolutely.
regenerative adds the things that are great about sustainable while maintaining the levels that biodynamics
Yeah, because I
establish.
know that's a whole
Totally.
other,
But-
the SIP certifies a whole other.
But it also holds to the microbiology and preserving the things, the things that really lack with SIP is they don't care what you spray in the vineyard. You
Okay.
can spray Roundup, you can spray whatever you want, basically.
Oh, interesting.
So that's where SIP
There's a baseline.
in and
for-
of itself, like really
Yeah.
doesn't work
Let me know.
if you're concerned about your, what what's being sprayed in the vineyard, basically, and in what kind of inputs are going into your onto your grapes.
Yeah, we talked about this last month because I was saying how I contribute to the Slow Wine Guide. And I wrote about Solminer in the guide in the 2023 guide, and will again in 2024.
Yeah.
When David responds to my email.
Wow.
Teasing.
Pushy much?
No, but I mean, but that is one of the things, is that when a winery tells me that they're certified organic, certified biodynamic, or practice either of the two, I don't have to question anything and I can sit down and do the interview. But sustainable means nothing, because sustainable allows synthetic herbicides, and that's the one requirement we have in the Slow Wine Guide, is to not use synthetic herbicides, no glyphosate, no Roundup, none of that crap. And it's shocking to think all these people run around saying, I'm sustainable, and you're like, but now that I know that you're allowed to use all this stuff, I don't know what it means.
Right. How is
Roundup
sustainable, basically?
And that's where it's either greenwashing, or if you actually see that we use the standards as a guidelines so that we can, every year we have more goals to become more sustainable. Or you just say, oh, we pay $700 or $1,000 to the standard, and it's our see, we are sustainable, but we're not really doing anything, to get better at it. And it's true for me, it's the glyphosate, it is a deal breaker.
And also, when you think about it, like sustainable, the one good thing is about the community, like thinking about maybe not to the standard that regenerative, but about taking care of the community, thinking about your waters for the fish to swim, thinking about schooling and your employees. But you're not thinking about them if you're spraying the ground with a lot of crap.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, and the workers, you're not really thinking about it if you're exposing them to cancer-causing chemicals.
Yeah, but I don't want to poo-poo, like, sip, if it's being used properly, it's a great tool.
The problem is it seems like with the what's the big California grape board, the Wine Institute or whoever, they're promoting sustainable as like they even say 90% of California grapes are sustainable. Meaning like you should buy wine with California grapes because 90% of them are sustainable. So you're doing something if you buy California wine. So problem solved, right? Well, that 90% are these. It's.
We want to be part of the people that are changing we need, and that's what I love about California, because California is the driver in a lot of that. So we want to be part of it.
For sure.
It sounds very similar to like the cage-free eggs, where just because it says they're cage-free doesn't mean that it's not a factory farm where all the chickens are packed into tight areas and their wings are clipped and it's dark and they cut their beaks and all the terrible things that they do to
everybody wants
chickens.
To say something good, so you feel good about
buying more of that product.
Right.
It's why my wine is a Vintner Select Reserve limited edition special. All the words you can use on a label that mean absolutely nothing.
And clean.
Right.
Clean wine.
Yeah.
It's clean wine.
Exactly.
It's been
sustainable,
washed.
clean.
The grapes have been washed.
Yes. And peeled, apparently. To make rosé, you have to peel the grapes, from what Drew Barrymore taught me.
That's right.
So awesome. So two last questions. First, you mentioned the field blend, the Saint Laurent. Like, what else are you guys working on? What are some fun upcoming wines? Are there anything new or interesting that you have in the works for this year or the next?
Well,
vintage?
we make a lot of wines already, Chris.
You do. 2,500 cases worth, David.
Yeah. So you're welcome. Yeah, but the problem is like 15 different wines. Basically, it's 100 cases of each or something. 150 cases of each. And yeah, you're welcome to come down to. Anyone's welcome to come down to Los Olivos. Our tasting room's open 7 days a week. And we've got a lot of fun stuff. So we're just going to continue to basically, like I said, we have the field blend. We're working with some cool Grenache this past year. That's been cool. And cider basically.
And pet nuts.
So we have, on our it's all about biodiversity. We've planted 60, apple trees. They're all to various crazy like old cider varietals basically. So so we're doing that. So the cider is really cool.
And we'll see what at harvest might have some crazy idea again and make something new.
And you do a sparkling Riesling, right?
Yes.
Yeah, sparkling Riesling, a sparkling rosé, and we do a sparkling red. We've done a sparkling red for the since the beginning, because that was definitely influenced by Steve, who was doing, you know,
Sparkling
Nebbiolo at the
Yeah.
time. So
And are those are all pet nuts or?
the red
Method
is
Champenoise.
method champenois,
Okay.
and the rosé and the Riesling are method ancestral or pet nat, as you would. The two are interchangeable.
Method ancestral sounds fancier. You can
It
charge an
sounds
extra,
fancier.
you can charge an extra $20 for method.
Okay.
Yeah, so
ancestral.
we call the Riesling method ancestral because I think it's cool to age it longer, and then the rosé we call pet nat because I like that more, just like drunken in the last within the year or so, basically. So
Very nice.
lots of fun stuff. So a whole new vintage coming up, and you know, we're just going to keep focusing on the estate and then all the other fun stuff.
Nice. Well, you already answered part of my last question, which is if folks want to come in and do a tasting or get a hold of you or purchase more wines from you, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, the website, solminer.com, and then, but please come and visit us in downtown Los Olivos.
And what's
Conveniently
the-
located in downtown Los Olivos.
Convenient, very convenient.
And every first Saturday, we also do like a farm tour. So we offer farm tours as well if you want to meet the animals and
Yep,
stuff
you can do a reservation online for that
on
as
our
well.
website.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun to get out to the vineyard. Well,
I've been there.
of course you have.
Well, I took my niece and nephew, and my nephew got to brush the donkey. He had fun.
Yes. And we
Yes.
may have lambs as of them coming any moment.
Yeah,
now.
that's what's new this year. More lambs.
More lambs.
Here they come. The
Awesome.
Vineyard
Well,
crew.
Thank
That's
you
great.
guys so much for being here. At this point, if anybody wants to unmute themselves and has a question, I don't know. I know you guys have I guess he's a not so little one anymore, but
Oh, he's happy that he can watch TV right now.
okay. But if anybody wants to unmute themselves and ask a question, it looks like Carrie does.
Yeah, hey, it's always interesting to me to ask winemakers about whole cluster and what they particularly like about it. I noticed you mentioned it for a couple of your wines, so if you would say something about that, that'd be awesome.
I think it gives it a little more structure, like the woodiness gives it more
What do you
structure.
mean?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting in the Carbonic because, you know, you've got such a fruity wine that's then whole cluster a bit, but we're not really using the whole cluster, or we're not really, you know, punching down the whole cluster. And then in a traditional, to me, it's always really interesting to do a whole cluster wine. I mean, there's really no other way to make it other than to get in and start stomping on it, basically. So there's just a connection there that you have, and it's, as far as, you know, natural winemaking, why not use the whole cluster, basically? So I think you have to have the right grapes and the right vintage to go fully whole clusters. So I think you need to be careful with it, basically, because you can get some green notes from it, basically. But for the most part, it can really, yeah, like Anna says, like it just can add more complexity to the wine, essentially.
Yeah.
Just from the stem tannin and stuff like that, is that kind of, because there's stem inclusion and there's whole cluster, which is sort of, I'm always trying to kind of parse the differences between those two. Because the stem inclusion, yeah, it's for more structure and you get the tannins and everything, but then whole cluster can do more than that, it seems. And I remember talking to one winemaker who does 100% whole cluster on everything, and he was saying, oh, well, part of the reason I love it is because I get way more juice. I don't, you know, you don't lose the juice during the stemming process, and so I have more wine,
Right.
essentially.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would really interesting. Well, okay, so to your first point, I don't really distinguish between whole cluster and stem inclusion. To me, the two are pretty much
Synonymous.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
synonymous. But I mean, so I guess in the whole cluster, was he talking about whole cluster whites by chance? Because I'm confused why he would lose more juice if he destemmed, because where's the juice going at that point? But
I think the way it would work is if you're running it through a destemmer and then have a sorting table, you might be pulling less developed grapes off, or if they're jacks or whatnot that might have some juice in them. It's not a tremendous amount of juice, but I mean, I could see in that case, if you're pulling flawed grapes out of your sorting table, how that would be a difference, where if you're then destemming,
throw it all
putting
in
it, and then throwing the stems literally back in and pressing or stomping at that point. I could see that, but that
really?
seems like a lot of work. I do know there are some winemakers.
Why
that
would
will-
you destem and then include the stems? I mean, is
Well,
I think-
the bad grapes.
right.
Yeah, because they want that sorting. They want to have the maximum amount of the best grapes. So they pull out the bad grapes, and then we'll add the stems in to add to the tannin and the greenness of it.
It's like an awful lot of extra work that is not low intervention at all.
Well, and the other thing is, if you're adding
Overthinking it, I think.
if you're adding the stems back in, you can control the amount of stems that you're putting in, as opposed to
Totally.
whole cluster, you're stuck with stems on every bunch. Whereas this one, you can throw in a quarter, a third, whatever it might be, if you think it just needs a
And
little.
that's what
extra.
we do. We destem partly, and we.
But we don't then add just bare rachis back into our wines, basically. Like the amount of whole cluster that we use is the stem inclusion aspect. You can control that by just saying this, here's 3 bins, we're going to destem 2, and we're going to use another one whole cluster. So your 1/3 whole cluster stem inclusion would be about the same. I don't know, it's like you're sort of splitting hairs at that point. I think you're sort of,
I feel like the answer is vintners be crazy.
yeah, it's just sort of
Yeah.
like, like we field sort, we pick, we farm well, we pick clean, and we have a very small winery. We don't have a fancy, and the team of people to sort the grapes. Basically, it all goes into a it's old world winemaking, basically.
But your sorting is interesting too. So you're sorting out in the vineyard primarily when you're picking, or do you
Well, if
double
you-
sort kind of a thing, or?
Well, if you find something, so field sorting is just like if you find something that's not really, you're going through the bin, and if you see something that you're not happy with, you throw it away, basically. But
Feed it to the birds.
But yeah, there's all kinds of levels of like, I mean, I don't think you could destem and then sort. You
Maybe.
have,
We don't do it.
once you're destemming, you really don't want to get in there, basically, as far as, I guess you would lose a lot of juice. I'm not quite sure how that works, but yeah, like you said, there's more than one way to skin a grape, basically.
I'm glad you said.
Thank you, Drew.
I'm glad you
very
said
much.
grape instead of cat, because my cat's walking around in the
No,
back.
so is mine. So
Are you the vegan in the group?
No,
I'm not a
that's-
vegan. No. I like cheese. I would be extremely sad if I was a vegan. I eat vegetarian, which only gives me a limited amount of sadness. But no, vegan. I could never do that. Would be,
Mike and Jeannie are vegans, plus my
Hmm.
girlfriend Teresa, who is upstairs right now getting over bronchitis. She is also a vegan, so I am highly cognizant of the
And
vegan side.
our wines are vegan as well.
Yeah. That's-
yeah, and we always try to think of it's very fair, because you always want to pair red wine with meat, and it's like, no, there's a lot of other things that
It's
you
basically mushrooms or ratatouille. It's pretty much your options when it comes to red wines. Maybe
And
some
so-
lentils. Lentils is the third option.
An eggplant roulade,
Yes,
essentially.
there you go. Yes.
If you're vegan and red wine, it's just all mushrooms, everything mushroom all the time.
Yeah, or lentils are an option as well. You can do a nice lentil loaf, you know.
Pasta marinara.
Mm.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. Although you have to make sure the pasta doesn't have egg in it. So it gets highly, highly complicated.
Uh-oh.
Before we finish up here, just a reminder, next week, our email for our April featured winery of the month will be going out. We're sticking in Santa Barbara this time, but we have two wineries for the price of one, and some true legends. We're going to have Bob and Louisa Lindquist as our
Wow.
featured winemakers. So we're going to be doing Lindquist wines and Louisa's Verdad Spanish wines.
Awesome.
So very exciting that we're going to be
Spanish
featuring
varieties from here. We're not,
from Santa Barbara. Yes,
right.
sorry.
Yeah, we're not doing their Spanish New Mexico project.
Mm.
Which they'll
Exactly.
tell you all about.
So keep an eye out for that coming Monday, Tuesday, sometime next week. You'll see the email from Allison and I. Any other questions for David and Anna at this point? Unmute yourself or forever hold your peace. Okay.
Well, thank you
Yes.
guys.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure talking with you.
The pleasure was all ours. You guys were fantastic. This was a lot of fun. The wines were phenomenal, especially, I mean, your whites are terrific, and that Blaufränkisch was just eye-opening. Can we expect a Zweigelt anytime soon? Because that seems to complete the whole Austrian
No,
circle.
St. Laurent is the next.
Something. All
Sure.
right. Well, then
We heard
Mate-
that Zweigelt is more finicky. I don't know if it would do well.
No,
here.
it's like
crossbreed the two together and you'll just naturally get.
That's
Zweigelt.
true. That's true. We'll do our own clone here.
Zweigelt is just Blaufränkisch and Saint Laurent.
We can blend it together.
Plant them next to each other, and you know.
Well,
it'll just happen.
we're doing a blend of the two, so that's essentially
Oh.
Zweigelt.
Wow. That's like I make a rosé by blending red wine and white wine together. That's my
right.
rosé.
Pretty much.
Cameron, I saw you wave your hand. Were you waving goodbye or were you trying to jump in with something? Carrie,
Oop.
did you have something?
Oh, no,
Oh no, that was my hand just to say hello.
No, I
Allison.
know. I didn't know if you were just waving or.
My friend Cameron's here, so.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. This was wonderful. We had a great time, and we will see you soon. And we'll let everybody know. We'll send an email out with the link to the YouTube page, and then link to your website and everything if people want to get in touch with you.
Sounds
Thank you
good.
so much.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Good
So
night,
good.
everybody. Take
Have
care.
a good night.